Picture this. You have glorious graphs, spectacular spreadsheets, and pristine pivot tables. You have a plan and you have all the data to back it up. You proudly present it, and it doesn't really go as expected. People aren't nearly as excited as you are. You wonder if they were even listening based on the questions that they've asked. And you're wondering what it is that you need to do to bring your team on board with this or get the buy-in that you need. Maybe you've considered learning a different language, getting more data, talking slower. Let's take a closer look at how expert bias may be impacting your ability to connect with an expert. Welcome back to another episode of Leading Beyond the Spreadsheet, the leadership podcast for analytically minded leaders who want to balance their technical expertise into embracing and excelling with the people part of work. I'm your host, Kris Liebau, owner of Action and Ease Coaching and keynote speaker. And today I am excited to welcome a special guest, Heidi Ettlinger. Heidi is a global advocate for growing women's programming and participation in snow sports. She has founded and established an impressive host of studies, international programs, and collaborations. Most recently, Heidi has helped co-found the World Women's Snow Sports Organization, uniting women snow sports leaders across disciplines, associations, and geographies. Heidi is a professional certified integral coach, an active PSIA examiner, and PSIA National Team alumni serving 2 terms. And as an entrepreneur and early innovator, she founded Gearing to Go in 2003, empowering the snow sports trade and consumers with educational guides. Heidi is passionate about creating opportunities for networking that inspire a spark and lead to ongoing collaborative teamwork. So that was a big mouthful. And what this means for those of you who are not in the snow sports industry is that Heidi is kind of a big deal, and she's an expert within this industry. And if you happen to know me personally, you'll know that my passion project is the National Ski Patrol. And she and I have had the pleasure of, I've had the pleasure of attending some of her seminars in multiple locations across the country over the last 10 years. And last January, we were standing at the bottom of a ski run, and she got onto the topic of expert bias. And my leadership coach brain just lit up on this topic. And it's been a little while, and I'm so excited to bring her onto the podcast today to dive into this topic in depth. And what does that mean as a leader, as a professional, as an instructor? How does that impact our communication? Heidi, welcome.
Thank you, Kris. That was an amazing introduction. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah. So this topic of expert bias. So share with everybody a little nugget of what that is and why we need to be conscious of it in how we communicate.
Well, a great spot to begin is that a lot of us have worked really hard to gather decades of experience and expertise. And many times we long to give that information back to others, or we want to lead teams. But one of the hardest pieces is being able to effectively communicate that information and engage the people that we're working with, and do it in a way that brings them along a path that they're hoping to engage upon.
Yeah. Well said. I'm sure there's a lot of folks that can really identify with that. One of the things that you had brought up was the curse of knowledge. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, I learned about the curse of knowledge when I was applying for a job that has a once every 4-year opportunity for an interview. So imagine that you spend 4 years to get ready to interview for a job. And if you don't get that job, then, well, you wait another 4 years and you prepare again. So during this job interview, I was preparing an indoor presentation, and I read the book by Daniel Pink, Make It Stick. And part of the book talks about becoming more of an expert in how you communicate your ideas, your thoughts, and your initiatives. And so within the book, it explains that after Again, decades of experience and expertise, you may be a leader, but what you may not be realizing is that this curse of expertise often prevents the opportunity to be as good of a communication specialist as you can. And that opened an incredible doorway into looking at lots of opportunities since then to really improve my own communication strategies and to help other people improve theirs.
Yeah. So, what are some of the key things that you share with people that are struggling in this area?
Well, one of the things that I've noticed in working with people who really struggle is that they're passionate about what they do and their intentions are very good, but their skillfulness in how they combine their information with how it's relayed to their party has a couple of areas for strengthening. And there's two main areas that are sometimes new to people or sometimes sort of sitting on their shoulder, but maybe not enough on the dashboard. And that's the capacity to be able to be humbly curious, to practice curiousness, but in a way that you are also humble to the person that you're communicating with. And the other is that you become an expert at asking great questions. So, two of these skillful pieces. Humble curiosity is really something to dig into if it's not something that you've looked at recently. And the second, becoming more of an expert in considering how you ask questions, what you ask, and understanding your audience so you can align that with them.
Yeah. What would you say is helpful for people in determining if expert bias is something that's impacting their ability to connect with their audience?
That's a great question. So, there's oftentimes that we all may question the people, the teams we're working with, the people we're supervising, those that we are delegating to, or maybe just some of our peers that hold a similar position. And we often attribute some of those struggles to poor communication, or they missed the mark, or, well, it was a difficult conversation, so maybe all of the right pieces didn't get through. So I think one of the big struggles that people have is first recognizing that difficult conversations occur all the time. In fact, when we talk about being better communication specialists, if we considered that difficult conversations are oftentimes what we have more often, it might help us welcome the opportunities to prepare for those a little bit better in advance.
Ooh, I like that. The idea of embracing the opportunity to learn and practice.
Mhm.
Like me standing at the top of the moguls and embracing that opportunity.
Yeah.
So you talked about, you said humbly curious and asking better questions. These are things I absolutely love as a coach. What does humble curiosity look like?
Well, the concept of humble curiosity and practicing that is the capacity to initially understand what it's like to feel grounded, aware, and present with the group or the individuals that you're working with. And it begins with something that I think we do well. We all think typically that we're very good listeners. But I'll be honest, even here right now, I'm looking at snow falling out the window. I have a separate monitor with some notes for the show. So there are a couple of distracting things, but fortunately, I'm able to come up with a couple of ways to reground me in the conversation. So if you want to be able to ask good questions and you want to start with being humble and curious, you need to begin with more deeply and actively listening to the people that you're working with. So, for example, again, right now I'm thinking about how to better connect with your listeners so that they could practice humble curiosity as well. And that definitely begins with becoming a more active participant in the listening conversation and being able to respond to people and meet them where they are versus where you're trying to take the conversation because you have a list of things that need to be covered.
Yeah, some key things in there, the attachment of the I know where I'm going and I'm going to get you there with me. Right? Part of stuff sometimes being more open and letting the conversation, again, conversation evolve naturally. Um, the other part of that with the curious questioning, sometimes I say I don't like assigning good and bad, that there's good curiosity and that there's bad curiosity. And so that's this partners versus opponents. With I hear what you're saying is this humble curiosity is more of this partners approach. Like, let's get there together. I'd like to understand what your questions are and things from your perspective versus what you one could call bad curiosity, which is the what's wrong with you? Why don't you understand this?
Mm, yeah. Yeah. And I think that the capacity to want to understand the people that you're working with or want to understand the problem that they're approaching that you're assigned to help them with is something that is a cornerstone to being able to practice a deeper skillfulness in how you communicate. And being curious doesn't mean acting as though you're not intelligent or feigning that you don't understand what's happening. Um, Being curious is that you recognize that you as a leader may not have all of the answers. And that potentially there's something that you have yet to learn that might be a critical link in helping, again, an individual or the team that you're working with be successful on their project.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges when you are a subject matter expert in a particular area and you do have all of that, and you talked about the passionate part, right? The cup overfloweth of information that we want to share with other people. And so there's the challenge is there's this spectrum of, right, wanting to share, treating somebody that like they don't know anything, and also not speaking above people. What suggestions do you have in working to adapt your audience to make sure that you're meeting them where they're at?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, especially sometimes we're greeting, meeting, or working with audiences that we may not know who they are. And so one of our first steps is getting to know your audience a little bit better. And even in professional speaking opportunities, there are enormous opportunities to get to know the audience ahead of time. And then obviously, a lot of us work in situations where you have a relationship with a group of people, but maybe there are some lenses in which you haven't yet explored to be able to understand those people a little bit better. So you may have people on your team who operate out of values, and those are very important to them. And so they're always going to make decisions based on some of those internal values. You may have other people on your team who go by evaluating success based on what's getting done, how it's getting done, and the framework or the structure for that. And then again, you may be having other people on your team who are a little bit more grounded in the collaborative effect. And so, for them to be successful in the workplace or in that particular project, it's all about working with their colleagues and evaluating decisions based on the collective group. So, when you have the opportunity to take a look at your team through a couple of different lenses, and you better understand how each of them is approaching the project, and then you look to provide some collective opportunities working as a group or as a team to understand those individual team members. Not only are you embracing a greater opportunity to truly serve as a facilitator and a leader, but your team has now found more cohesive threads to be able to work closer together.
Yeah. So, in looking at, we're talking about curiosity and asking questions. We're also very confident in what we know when we're experts in something. And how does that confidence that comes with expertise sometimes work against people when they're right trying to adapt to all of the different needs of the people that they're working with?
Well, I think the question that you're asking is a little bit, if I was to paraphrase the question, it might be, how is confidence sometimes a double-edged sword?
Yes.
So how can one's confidence work for you, and where are some opportunities where confidence, much like an implicit bias, may work against you?
Mhm.
So we know for sure that the difference between men, one of the differences, some of the time between men and women, under this banner of confidence, is that sometimes if we look at this through the gender lens, we find that some people have an easier time presenting their thoughts and information and communicating their ideas with more confidence. We know that sometimes people can be very judgmental of how people speak about their expertise and their confidence. At the beginning of the program, as you were announcing some of my own accomplishments, um, I was resisting the temptation to turn around in my chair and say, really? No, I'm very proud of my accomplishments. And it's taken me a long time to be able to share out some of that pride that I have. And I think for people who have an enormous amount of pride and confidence in their experience and their skills, one of the greatest benefits that they serve to their team is their capacity to be able to relay that in a way that leaves the door open for further growth and learning. So, when we talk about confidence and the capacity to use that to your benefit, how can you lean on your experience and your expertise while also leaving the door open that makes it clear that you're interested in new information or other ways of looking at the same problem, or an interest in working collaboratively together? And I think the people who have had the most struggle with that sometimes present their confidence in a particular situation as though they are um, the only person who is capable of responding to that particular situation, um, and maybe seem less approachable, sometimes less trustworthy, and oftentimes more difficult to have an authentic, honest, and transparent conversation with. And so I think that in the end, it's possible on a number of levels to be highly successful with an extraordinary amount of confidence. And how you use that confidence to work with your teams is where the balance is made.
Yeah. So, having you on and having an expert with us, do you have an example that you could share with us of how you have been the expert and shared that and also welcomed the rest of the group into participating and collaborating to move something forward?
Yeah, so I'm so fortunate that I work with a number of different companies inside the snow sport industry and outside of the snow sport industry, who have launched new programming, oftentimes for people who are new to using their product or new to engage in their educational programming. And at the same time, I've also forged a number of programming under my own banners and with a collective team. And so I have worked for people who have a large amount of expertise and have a goal in mind. And I've worked within a team who has a large amount of expertise and has some goals of their own. And I think that the challenges in both of those situations are aligning people on what the end goal is, and making sure that at the start that team has an incredible amount of trust in one another, and recognizing that each person likely has an area of expertise that is slightly different than the other. And the aim is to create an environment where people are capable and interested in bringing forward their unique areas of expertise to contribute to the team's goals overall.
Yeah. What really stuck out with me in what you shared there, again, having the end goal in mind. Right? This is all where we want to go and having goal. This is all where we want to go and having that all in mind. And that there's some initial work in having that set and setting an intention, informing the team on how we're going to move forward together, and that intentionality.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. So it's interesting that sometimes the challenge when we're kicking off a project and we have new people, right, it feels like there's this clean start, and that can be a challenge sometimes when we're working within an organization that has matrixed teams, or we're working on a different project or we're shifting. And so some of the formality of forming a new team isn't there because we've kind of worked with one another or we know about one another. So I can see where there's value in looking at each endeavor and really setting things up to make sure that all of those things are in line, both where it is that we're going
Hmm.
and how it is that we want to get there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
certainly.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, both of those things have nothing to do with the data. Right, with all the, the charts and things, we're looking at the goal and doing that setup. A lot of times I talk about there being two modes of communication. There's the facts and data aspect of it, and then there's this emotional and motivational side of communication. And I feel like, right, that's kind of where we're back at it, is how do we set that up, make sure that we're going to the same place, and how do we want to get there?
Yeah, there are a lot of opportunities in one's career pathway to explore being a part of different types of teams. So I know sometimes some of your viewers and listeners are people at various junctures in their career pathway. And I would encourage a lot of people to consider some of those volunteer groups versus just within your paid profession groups as chances to work as a part of a team, and to experience slightly different cultures in that matrix that you spoke about, if one of your goals is to evolve your communication strategies, and look at how you guide people to that endpoint.
Yeah, you've wrapped around multiple times back to what's important to these people right now. What thoughts do you have on important questions, or that pre-flight checklist, if you will, when you're preparing to share data or have some of these difficult conversations in order to take those things into consideration?
That's a very timely question because I actually have a meeting tomorrow with some people that I've never met, but I know that they're interested in the subject that I'm presenting on, and so I'm actually going through the process right now of thinking how to introduce the data that I'm going to present, how I'm going to introduce some of the strategies or actionables that have come from the data to make them excited about engaging with the information and wanting to take it under their roof, and then decide how best to unpack it. So I'm starting to draft a couple of questions for the group to learn a little bit more about what they understand before sharing that data set. And then also asking some questions to clarify what I understand about them, their roles, and their opportunity to impact the business where they work, so that before I've even unpacked the data, I have a little bit more understanding of what they value, and what their interest levels are in the presentation overall.
Yeah, it's interesting when I'm thinking, and I'm got little boxes and flowcharts and things running around because that's my brain, is acknowledging the limits of your expertise, knowing that you are where the bounds of that reside, and you aren't experts in them. You don't know what they want or what it is that they need to do. And that, again, that humble curiosity coming into, even though you have this trove of facts and data, being curious about what is the best way to communicate this to them, what's actually important to them, So rather than trying to pack everything that you know that may be relevant to what's going on, you're sort of rolling out the carpet in a way, right? Like a good, good wait staff. Like, yes, I have this beautiful menu of all of these things. Let me see, what I might actually recommend from here in order to move this conversation or relationship forward.
Yeah, that's such a great insight. I can't tell you how many times I've finished delivering a speaking opportunity or a presentation or simply facilitating a group who's asked to study something that I've worked with and left and thought, I would probably go back and do it differently in the following ways. And most of the time, it's because I learned something along the way, and made as many pivots and shifts as I possibly could to better direct the information to better align with the audience. And I think that's probably what makes my job and your job so exciting, is that you never do the same thing twice exactly the same. But as an inspirational piece to some of the leaders and some of the budding professionals that you have in underneath the roof that you work with, is that those people are willing to go out and have some trial experiences. And some of those trial experiences are great building blocks to being able to pivot in real time, to be able to adjust the messaging, and ultimately being able to meet people where they are in the moment. And not everybody can do that. And I think that's sometimes what really separates a great presenter or a great leader, or somebody who's very thoughtful in how they go about sharing their own expertise.
Yeah. And it takes practice to get there. So if you're in a situation where you've gone and you've shared the data and you're going back through afterward going like, oh, here's all the ways I could have done this differently. What thoughts do you have about the best way to pivot and initiate, right, subsequent conversations? Or right, sometimes we have to backpedal because it didn't go the way we wanted it to the first time and we need to come back and try. What are some strategies to help evolve and practice when we didn't hit it out of the park the first time?
Yeah, well, I think if you're in the moment, don't be afraid to pause, and don't be afraid to acknowledge that you may have missed something, and don't be afraid to switch gears. I think sometimes people who are proud of themselves and have a high degree of confidence oftentimes see those things I just mentioned as a weakness in leadership, or not being very capable. When actually, the research tells us that when you are capable of making those adaptations in real time and acknowledging something that you may not have seen or may not have understood well enough about the audience you were working with, that is an incredible opportunity to build a level of trust that's entirely different than just steamrolling ahead with the information, and thinking that that was a presentation of solid leadership or expertise in general.
Yeah, I can see we talked a little bit more about confidence before with stuff too. And sometimes there's this fear that if we break the facade about that and pivot, that in some way we're lacking that or that there's some type of doubt. So, really, again, embracing that and looking at that as an opportunity to build trust and to check for understanding as you're working to build this relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. What are some other thoughts or some concluding nuggets that you would love for people to keep in mind as they walk away from this episode?
Well, we've mentioned this term humble curiosity a few times. And it may, if you're diagramming a sentence, it may just sound like we're spitballing against a wall here, but there's actually quite a bit of research about practicing humble curiosity. And so I would encourage your listeners to reach out to more information on that. I would also encourage people to think about investigating how to become grounded, present, and more aware as a method of becoming a better listener. There are some fascinating strategies available that help one develop your active listening skills. And coming from someone who thought I was a good active listener and then digging into a year of a much deeper practice with that, I can honestly say that there are a lot of resources available to be able to try those on and practice them in a number of different environments. And it truly has a significant impact on your communication strategies overall, and likely that you'll learn something along the way that's going to impact the future of your career and your profession. And again, especially for people who are budding leaders and people who are really aspiring for new heights in their profession and things that they feel deeply passionate about.
Yes, the active listening is so important. I have a workshop called Coaching Skills for Leaders, and we do this exercise called extreme listening. And people always walk away going, whoa, after that, because it creates some different perspective about what's actually happening in our minds when we think we're listening. For sure.
Yeah.
Excellent. Heidi, if people want to learn more about you, Gearing to Go, what is the best way for them to reach out and get connected with you?
So I have a profile on LinkedIn, which shares all of the different ways that my profession shows up in my life, much like planets orbiting around the sun. There are a number of different things that I do that make up my profession as a whole. And so LinkedIn is probably the best place to visit me, and it's easy to get in touch with me there.
Okay, excellent. And we'll put that in the show notes for folks that would like to reach out and connect. Heidi, thank you so much for taking time out of what is starting to be a busy winter ski season here. And I look forward to seeing you hopefully on a slope sometime in the next year or so.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you soon out in the Midwest, and I am grateful, so deeply grateful for this opportunity, and really thankful for our friendship over at least the last decade, and finally to meet here on your podcast and be able to speak with all of your members.
Yeah, it's always, every conversation is insightful and delightful.
That's a great way of summarizing it.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Leading Beyond the Spreadsheet. If you want to make sure that you never miss an episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button or follow us on wherever you get your favorite podcasts. We'll see you next time.